Now, we began yesterday, as we look now at our overview, we have looked at the sins that were announced and the resulting judgment upon Judah in those first 24 chapters, revealed repeatedly in many different ways, in dramas and riddles and symbolic acts, as well as oral messages and in visions, interpretations of those. And equally, the judgment that comes upon the foreign nations. And primarily, the cause of their judgment is the way they have responded to the people of God. Unfortunately, responded in improper ways. They did not bless them. Instead, they cursed the people of God. They mocked them. They maligned them. They tried to take advantage of them. They turned them over to other enemies. They tried to get the spoils of war. Anything they could do. And God has His justice there also. He is fair. He is just in all He does. And when the news of the fugitive of the collapse of Jerusalem came at the focal point chronologically and really in many ways thematically in the book at the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC, and Jerusalem collapsed and that fugitive left, and he came to Babylon the night before he arrived, as we mentioned yesterday. God opened the mouth of Ezekiel. His muteness stopped. And he freely could move now among the people and intercede for them and encourage them and minister to them as a prophet would delight to do. And in that night before the fugitive arrived with the news that Jerusalem has fallen. It's all over, guys. Everything you were hoping wouldn't happen, which you've been arguing with me about, and which I've been telling you is going to happen, it's a done deal. It's happened. Okay? So let's deal with reality. But right before that sad news comes, he gives these night messages from 33:21 to the end of chapter 39 as an encouragement to them. Now that encouragement and hope, as we're going to see, will continue in another series of messages many years later, way down there at 573, when we have the messages in Ezekiel 40 to 48, which will still be encouragement and hope. But right here before everything collapses, God steps right in and through Ezekiel says, let me encourage you guys as to what I'm going to do. The hope that you have to look forward to. Now, as we look at these chapters, and actually through the remainder of the book, again, try to put yourself in the place of the exiles. Okay? I think we always have to do that. We don't just sit here academically and kind of look at the book and read it, and it's so far away. So put yourself there. You have this sudden shock. Your hopes humanly are dashed. Okay? They're gone. Because you'd put your hope in the fact that Jerusalem would not fall. You'd put your hope in Egypt. All those hopes have been dashed. They're gone. And you're just kind of sitting there limp. I never planned it this way. What's going to happen? I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am. I'm in a strange land. I don't like it here. Things are different. What's the future? I don't have any future. I don't know if you've been there, but you may be there at some time. What is God doing? Okay? And God steps in and encourages them, but as He begins to talk about what He's going to do, He doesn't put real specific time notes on it. Okay? And that drives us Westerners up a tree. We just go bonkers. Okay? Come on. Give us some specifics, Is it that guy? Is it this event? Is it that time? The future to them when God says, after many days, or at the end times, they don't know when the end time is. At least we know that the end time for them is at least 2,500 years longer than where they were. Okay? But we have the privilege of hindsight. They didn't know that. So please don't make them know that. Okay? They didn't know because to the Hebrew, it's over there. How far over there? And naturally in their context, he's going to talk about things like restoration and return from dispersion. What would you think if you were an exile? What? But, in that context, what would you be thinking of? Yeah, and probably what? They're gone. They're out here in Babylon. Well, probably we're going to get to leave here sometime. We're going to go back to the land, and we won't have to be in Babylonian captivity any longer. It's extremely natural. That's where they are. That's exactly what we would expect from them. But God, when He speaks of it, again, as I mentioned, prophetically, they think conceptually. Yes, your hope is the fact that God will restore you to the land. He may restore you in the captivity. He's going to restore some others at another time, and ultimately they're all going to get back there. Okay? And the Messiah will reign. Well, if you look at the intertestamental time, many of the Jews genuinely thought that the bad times, the judgment part, was the Babylonian captivity, and once they came back, there was a messianic hope. In a good sense, of course. But they were thinking, He's going to come soon and we're going to have the kingdom. Okay? And you see, that's why they had a hard time understanding why Jesus had to die, among other things. Because the king's coming. We're in this thing. It's happening. Because they are trying now to do what we try to do. I want to put it in a particular situation. I want it in my day. But God's looking, is revealing it conceptually from now to the end. And here, frequently, we're going to see, it's very clear that He's talking about not only now, but then at the end, because we'll have such phrases that there will no longer be X. There will no longer be this. Oh, wait a minute. After our 2,500 years, approximately, we know that there are some longers as it comes to the people of Israel. They aren't in the land. Yeah, they were. They're not today. Are they still mocked in any way? I don't know a people in the world that aren't, by almost any other nationality, looked at in some way as, it's the Jews. It's interesting, isn't it? Anywhere you go. So these things obviously did not happen then, all of them. Some of them did, and some of them didn't. And we have to therefore understand this is a conceptual understanding of restoration, but with the emphasis upon the final culmination of that. But that does not do away with the fact that they're encouraged, and they were encouraged, I'm quite sure, they're going to return. And they did return from Babylonian captivity. Now, you see, that's not the way we think. We wanted to say, okay, would you please, Ezekiel, talk first about Babylon and returning from that captivity, then tell us the next one, and then would you come over here and then make sure that this one is all at the end. Don't stir them in the pot a little bit, please. We don't like the plot. We don't like just the pot of restoration. We want to have all the ingredients. Please take them out and give us each one at a time. Now, I say we have to begin to think as the prophets think and as things are revealed. And time is not their great concern. By that I mean, I'm thinking specific time. nor often is specific identification of people or places their great concern. That's not to say we have no identifications. But what do we do today when we come to passages like we're going to come to here? Who is it? Where is it? You know, is it Germany? No. It's Russia. No. Is it China? No, it was Japan. You know, we go through all these type of things. Why? Because we're always trying to identify. We want to know who it is. You know, well, is it going to be at the beginning of the tribulation, at the end of the tribulation, the middle of the tribulation, and no tribulation, or in the millennium, at the beginning of the end, or what? Where are these things? Yeah. That's where we spend, unfortunately, as evangelicals, most of our time, rather than understanding the message. We get all hung up over when and who. And they're not hung up over it. I'm sorry, guys. It's just not their big issue. Again, that's not to say we don't know anything. And we can talk about it, and we can get some general ideas that obviously, if they're talking about the far end time, we're not talking about Nebuchadnezzar in some of those situations. Okay? Those aren't real difficult things to come up with. But I just say that so that we can relax. I hope you can relax. And let God speak his message through Ezekiel. And then there's nothing wrong with thinking about those things and doing some speculation. But please let me remind you of this. In your interpretation of prophecy, do not base it on political speculation. It'll always keep changing. Go back and read all the books. As I just told you, the first, King of the North. We're not talking about the King of the North here, but so we're free. But the King of the North was Germany. Well, once Germany passed off the scene, we got to get a new one. Well, it's Russia. They're north, aren't they? Yeah, they're north. Okay, well, we got a new one. It was Japan. Once they passed off the scene, now, let's got to pick up another. Oh, it's got to be China. It's always interesting to me that they've never come up with a king of the South. Nothing against the Arab people. I have a lot of dear friends who are Arabs, but they are certainly never united. So who is it going to be? Oh, isn't that terrible? We don't know. Well, that's okay. I don't have any problem with that I don't know. Okay. Now, I want to mention that framework because as we come here, he's going to be looking to encouragement of the future for them. And that future is going to go from them to the end. The hope they have. And that's the hope of the nation of Israel. Okay? So we saw that here, one of the issues that's very predominant is the issue of the land. It's not the only issue. But you're going to see land having almost an issue everywhere you come up through chapter 39 and even when we get over into 40. Because the land and the people and their God are always related in the ancient Near East. You cannot separate them. Daniel Block has written a nice monograph on that. The actual name of it has just slipped my mind. But where he it actually comes part out of out of his dissertation of how he shows how in the ancient Near East, as well as in Israel, how these three factors, it's like a triangle. You got God and land and people. And they always relate, and you got to take them along together. So the land is very significant to them. Obviously, we have God there and we have the people, so the other factor that we're going to see visually, in a sense, as far as what happens and what is foretold and what they look forward to and hope is they'll be in their land, because right now they're not. Okay, so as a nation, they're hurting. Okay, they're really hurting at this point. They don't have their land. So that's why, as we began in 21 yesterday, in essence, the people are, if we could kind of read between the lines, the people are saying, "We're here. Jerusalem's fallen. Have we lost it all? Are we gone? Are we gone as a people? Where's the land? And the encouragement is from the covenants, the Abrahamic covenants. God will be faithful. Okay? But you're not going to be in the land, people, as long as you disobey my ways. It's still there. It's still yours. You haven't lost it. But if you want to get back there, you need to return to me. You need to repent. Oh, yeah, that's what you've been saying all along, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I better think about that now, because I'm here and it's there. And we're not together. And if I'm going to get there, I'm going to have to change my heart. Okay? So, we come to 34, the next message that he gives here. And it says, the word of the Lord came to me, son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them. Very fascinating message in 34. He's going to talk about the shepherds. The shepherd imagery and picture is predominantly used for the leaders, and primarily those who lead the country, if I can put it in this way, politically. Now, I say that with some hesitancy because you cannot divorce in Israel the political from the religious. Okay? Because they were the king. What do we have in the Davidic covenant? The king is in a son-father relationship with God. Okay? That's an interesting concept in the Davidic covenant. He is one who is closely related. He is one who is leading the people and is to have a copy of the Mosaic covenant that he reads in day and night. If you go back to Deuteronomy 17. That's what's to lead him. He is to depend upon God. He's not to depend upon armies with the chariots and horses from Egypt. He's not to depend upon wealth and money. He's not to depend upon alliances which were sealed with marriages, so that when he has many marriages and dependent upon those women, he is depending upon the security of alliance. He is to trust God. That's what the leader's to do. Solomon blew it on every level. And he's just one among many. But they're to trust God. They're to be servants of Yahweh who hear what the master says, which is in the covenant. Okay? And then do it. They're to read day and night so they know how to guide their people. So you cannot separate the political leader in that sense, the king and so forth, from the religious element. But when we speak of shepherds, it's not a term that's normally used for priests or prophets. It's the distinction that I'm wanting to make. It's used for the leaders of the people. Okay? So he's going to talk, and we've already seen Ezekiel talk about leaders and how important it is, and how it really was the leaders who were there, it sounds strange, encouraging, helping, leading, guiding astray the people that has ultimately led them to captivity. Though Ezekiel makes it very clear to remind the people, you didn't have to follow. Okay? So you can't just say it's their fault. But God's greatest concern is about the leaders. And I've said it before, but I come back again because this book is so strong to us about this. Men, as you are a leader in your church or whatever the ministry may be, and you will have some form of leadership, it's an awesome responsibility. Lead the people in God's ways, not your ways. And sometimes the temptation is very subtle and easy to lead them in my ways. It's my church. We see it all the time, don't we? Well, that's John MacArthur's church. No, I don't think John would probably be real thrilled with that. But that's what we tend to do, isn't it? We go and pick out the person and make the associations. And people do that. And you're going to be, this is Joe's church. This is Bill's church. This is your church. No, it isn't your church. I see our situation in Moscow at times. Been heavily involved trying to help and guide and train people to be leaders, to be elders and so forth in the church. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes and then I think, I may not be here. I'm not going to be here very long. And I'm trying to train people. What's going to happen? In other words, I start owning it. And but if I'm not here, what's going to happen? I need to. No, we're all indispensable, guys. I know it's. Sometimes we don't think so. I've been there. I fight that at times because you get so tied to the situation. But it's not ours, okay? But we are the leaders. So are we leading them to follow us or to follow him? And I see this in the church today. It amazes me at times how everybody believes in the ecclesiological concept that Christ is the head of the church. But not practically, okay? Everybody knows that. The pastor's the head of the church, right? No, he's not. Jesus is. Someday we need to start practicing that a little bit more. Let him give the direction to the church. That's just in one area. See, it's so easy. Now, we come here and he talks to the shepherds. And he announces judgment. Woe to the shepherds of Israel. And please note what they do that we should not do. Okay, this is what you call negative learning. You learn from the mistakes of someone else. Woe to the shepherds who only take care of themselves. Okay, leaders and you in a church can do where you're just caring primarily for yourself. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? Oh, but that takes time. That takes a lot of work. That's work. I may not get a lot of sleep tonight. People don't have problems on my schedule. I'm trying to explain to these elders in Moscow that we need greater help in pastoral care. Well, we don't see anything. I said, would you like to get the calls I get at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's hard for them. It's not going to be our schedule, guys. A lot of you already know that very well. Okay? Should not the shepherd take care of the flock? You eat the curds, you clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. Now that can happen where we become so self-centered, we want to climb the pastoral ladders or the ministry ladders to success. We like the material success of that. I can't imagine. It blows my mind sometimes what pastors make in this country. Especially when I know what pastors make in Russia. And we're taking care of ourselves. You have not strengthened the weak. Now here's another point. You have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. People are hurting. If you haven't found that out in ministry, I don't know where you've been. Because I know there's a lot of people hurting in Southern California. They're hurting all over the world. They're hurting people in Moscow. Oh, wow, they're hurting people. And somebody needs to be out there healing the sick and binding up the injuries and helping them in that way. That's part of the responsibility of a leader, to be responsible for that. You have not strengthened the weak or healed them, bound them up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. Have we lost our heart for evangelism, those that are lost? Do we have people in our ministry that we know have needs, but we're just too busy to reach out to them? And then later, when something happens and perhaps they're gone or whatever, we say, oh wow, I really should have done something. Well, in this case, the shepherds of Israel were not searching for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. I hope we're not harsh and brutal. But I've seen some pastors that have clubbed people with the truth. You know, you sinners, bang, bang, bang. And, they let them have it. Well, they are sinners. We're all sinners. We have to be sensitive to know where the people are and the best way to communicate to them in that way. So, since that's the way you led, you were scattered. Well, as a result, the people were scattered abroad because there was no shepherd, no real shepherd. Okay, in this case. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. And it's our responsibility. If the people are not shepherded, they're going to go astray because they have not been guided and directed in the right way, and they're going to become food for the wild animals. If you do not teach people the truth, they're going to go out there and hear a lot of junk, and they're going to be led astray by analogy. Okay? My sheep have wandered all over the mountains and every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. No care. Just don't care. Leadership are those who are to care for those they lead first. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares Adonai Yahweh, because my flock, it is his flock, not our flock. My flock lacks a shepherd. Because of that, and has so been plundered, and has become food for all the wild animals. Because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than the flock. Therefore, O shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what Adonai Yahweh says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. What a statement. Instead of feeding the flock, they're feeding on the flock. What are we doing in our ministry? Are we seeking to bolster ourselves? People think we're so wonderful. You're a wonderful teacher. You're a wonderful preacher. Look, your church is growing and so forth. Well, nothing wrong with teaching and preaching and with the church growing. But are we doing that at the expense of the people? But we really don't care for them. We're really caring for ourselves. That's what the shepherds and the leaders of Israel were doing. They'll no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. What an indictment against leadership. And I said it's good to read this periodically to remind ourselves what we are not to do, but in contrast what we are to do as shepherds of the people. So that in verse 11, for this reason, he says, I will search, I myself, this is God, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his flock when he is with them, so I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they are scattered on the day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries. I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel and the ravines and all the settlements of the land. I will tend them in good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing place. They will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture in the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares Adonai Yahweh. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. I will do it, says God. I will be the one who rules. I will be the shepherd of my people. We're going to go back to the way it was supposed to be. Israel was a people whose king was Yahweh. And under the time of the judges, they said, it's too tough. You have to trust God. So we want a king of our own, like everybody else. And remember, he told Samuel, they're not rejecting you, Samuel. They're rejecting me. And the people of Israel rejected Yahweh as their king. They rejected everybody talks about what's the greatest type of government? Democracy. Not necessarily. After all, we have kingship here all the time. There must be something that might be, there may be something else, some other options. But the greatest one is a theocracy. And one of those days, guys, we're going to be in it. We're going to be with our Lord, and He rules. He's the King. He is the King now, but just face to face with that, I can't wait. What could be better? Forget the democracy stuff. Give me Jesus. I want Him to be just the King, and that's all I need. I don't need a better ruler than that. Well, He's going to rule them, and He's speaking here, I will do that. And He's going to go on to elaborate on that. He says, as for the flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I'll judge between, by the way, He just said He doesn't like the sleek ones, and He's going to point out, those who lead, who fatten themselves on the flock, He's going to remove. He's going to remove the false shepherds, the unfaithful shepherds. And they're going to be replaced with the true shepherd. John 10, the true shepherd. He will be the one who will lead the flock. And the way I will be just, he says, I will shepherd the flock with justice, so that in 17, he says, I'll judge between one sheep and another, between rams and goats. So rams and goats are those that, often tried to get it over the sheep. Is it not enough for you to feed on good pasture? He's kind of speaking to the rams and goats, keeping with the imagery of the shepherd and the sheep. Is it enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? I mean, after all, I've given you the pasture and I've given you clean water, and you as the leaders have gone around muddying the place, and you make it where you trample the land so nobody else can eat and no one else can drink. You're destroying the provisions that I've made for them. Must my flock feed on what you have trampled and drink what you have muddied with your feet? Very graphic, beautiful illustration using the imagery of the shepherd and the sheep. Therefore, see, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep, because you shoved with flank and shoulder, butting the weak sheep with your horns until you've driven them away. I know most of you probably aren't shepherds. I'm not either. But I have had the privilege to watch shepherds in the ancient in the Middle East. You ever had that opportunity? Ever been in? Any of you ever raised sheep? Hey, there we go. We got a shepherd. It's interesting to watch them and how they do that. And of course, the rams often will butt, the sheep. There's some, turf protection that goes on in these situations. Very vividly given here. He says, I will save my flock in verse 22. And they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and another. I'll place over them one shepherd, my servant David. And he will tend them, and he will tend them and be their shepherd. I, Yahweh, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, Yahweh, have spoken. Now, I'm convinced that in the context here and in the context of the end time, and the fact that the concept of David, he is a visual representation continually given of the one who will come. He will be like unto David. the Messiah. I'm convinced we're talking about the Messiah at this point. I don't think this is going to be actual resurrected David there. If it is, guys, I'm not going to say, oh, so wrong. But I think contextually in the way David continually is a model that is set before the other leaders as the ideal king and the model of what God is going to bring at the end time. That I think that the picture is that God says, I'm going to, because he's already said, I will shepherd my sheep. So we already have in the text that God's going to do it, and that means we're going to have to get the descendant of David, Jesus, who is God, to give the leadership. I will be their God, and David will be, my servant David will be the prince among them. He is the true shepherd. As I say, we go to John 10, we have that developed in the New Testament of the true shepherd who will shepherd the flock. And that imagery, it's picked up again, and I don't think John was ignorant at that point of Ezekiel 34. Because this is the passage in the Old Testament that really zeroes in on the shepherd and the shepherding work of God himself over his flock. So it will be Jesus. It will be the Messiah who will shepherd. Is that going to be immediately at the time when the Babylonian captivity takes over? No. Now we could say, well, they didn't know that. No, they didn't know that. So they had that expectation. And rightly so. We simply live at approximately 2,500 years later, and we happen to know it didn't happen then. Okay? But for them, they hoped for that, and rightly so, just like you hope for the second coming. I hope you do. I hope you hope for the coming of Jesus. You hope he comes at the rapture. You hope it's imminent because the Scripture says it's imminent. We know that imminency is that which we are to live with. You say, well, it's been 2,000 years since Paul. That's okay. I'm ready. Let's go. I hope he comes today. Just saying, great. Friday the 13th, my luckiest day. It comes right here. And we can all go together. Won't that be fun? I'm ready. Let's go. He comes at any time. Now, the false shepherds, you've had to deal with that, people. But I want you to know I'm going to give you a new true shepherd, the Messiah. When you're in exile sitting there and say, wow, all those guys, I don't have to deal with them anymore. Those Jehoahazes and Jehoiakims and Jehoiachins and Zedekiahs. Whew, wow. I get to have the Messiah. That's got to be an encouragement, even if you're sitting in the Babylonian captivity. See? And this was the night before they're going to find out Jerusalem's fallen. Then he says in the latter part of the chapter, he says, I will make a covenant of peace with them and rid the land of the wild beasts so that they may live in the desert and sleep in the forest in safety. Now, the covenant of peace, I think, is the covenant of peace. There are many people who come and immediately say the covenant of peace is the new covenant. I think the new covenant is the new covenant. Okay? But I think the covenant of peace, what he's saying is, I'm making a covenant with you guys that when I come and restore you to the land, and we're looking here towards the end, when we all get back here, and I've cleansed you, and I've removed all the wild beasts and so forth, you will live in security and peace, and I will rule. And all your covenants will have reached their fruition and fullness. That's my agreement with you. That's my covenant of peace. There will be peace. And if you've never been in the Babylonian captivity, you don't understand fully what it means, peace. Guys, we live in the rat race today. We live in a situation of sinful mankind. If you're in ministry, you are a target, and people will potshot at you one way or the other. Okay? And it's not a lot of fun, and it's a war. Okay? There is no peace. In that sense, if you understand what there is peace inwardly in our relationship with Jesus. That's what carries us along, and the work of the Spirit. But one day we'll just be able to relax and enjoy peace with Him and His kingdom.
Hebrews chapter 4 talks about entering the rest and entering the peace. Do you believe that there's a connection between this covenant of peace here and perhaps what the author of Hebrews was talking about later on?
I think there may well be. I think it's more than that in Hebrews. But interestingly, we call the book Hebrews. And I think there's some Hebraic thought in the book of Hebrews. And that's why I think a number of people have had problems with the book of Hebrews. Again. But I think, obviously, the rest there, he's talking about the rest of the people of Israel and the way, the practical situations of them. Then he talks about that for us today. We can rest in Him, but someday there'll be the full fruition of that rest in Jesus. And I can't wait. It's going to be wonderful. And that can be, I hope that's an encouragement to you, to keep on, fight the good fight, finish the course because of what's laid up for you in heaven. That's the way the New Testament's telling us the same message. So, keep on going. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes we don't want to keep going. By the way, there's the covenant of peace. Wow. Look what he says, and we understand something like this. You say, well, how do we know what the covenant? Well, look at the context. What does the text say? I'm going to make a covenant of peace with you. I think he probably is going to say something that would relate to that. Okay, what's involved in it? Well, I'll rid the land of wild beasts so that you may live in the desert and sheep in the forest safely. Okay, I will bless them and the places surrounding my hill. I will send down showers in the seasons. There will be showers of blessing. The trees of the field will yield their fruit, and the ground will yield its crops, and the people will be secure in their land, and it will be fruitful, and it will be, it will be marvelous what you have. They will no longer be plundered by the nations, nor will the wild animals devour them. They will live in safety. They'll have peace. That's what he's talking about, the security and the wonderfulness of what they will have at that time. No one will make them afraid. And I will provide for them a land renowned for its crops, and they will no longer be victims of famine in the land or bear the scorn of nations. Then they will know that I, Yahweh their God, am with them, and they, the house of Israel, are my people. And that formula, by the way, I will be their God and they will be my people. It's a formula all the way back from the Mosaic covenant. It's a relational formula. And we've already seen it repeated a number of times already in Ezekiel. God's relationship to His people is that He is their God and they are His people. It's a relationship. And that relationship and the fullness of that relationship will certainly be true at this time of peace and security. And in verse 31, you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, are people, and I am your God, declares Adonai Yahweh.
This covenant of peace, is there any symbolic representation for that being used 4 times in the scripture, starting with Numbers 25?
By symbolic, what do you mean?
When we hear the covenant of peace, should we kind of link it on to the other passages, or is the covenant of peace in the other passages in this passage different? Because Numbers 25 speaks about a covenant of peace, a priestly.
I think we have to think Hebraically. It starts, and there are relationships, and it can be relationships in a given situation. But the ultimate, here we're seeing the ultimate manifestation of that is at the end time. But it's a conceptual concept that God is we can have peace now individually in our lives, and we can have peace as a people if we follow Him. I mean, for Israel, I'm speaking of Israel. We could do that in the United States too if we followed Him. Anyone could be. They could know peace. Obviously, it's peace in not a perfect environment at this point, as it ultimately will be. So yes, I think there is a continuum that goes through a relationship in that sense. Now, the false shepherds will be put aside. The true shepherd will take their place. What a tremendous encouragement. And there'll be at that time the fruition and the fulfillment, the fullness. Fulfillment, I've really moved away from that term because I think it gets us in trouble. Because fulfillment has the connotation it happens, boom, right here at that point. I see it growing to fruition, and you finally have the fullness of the concept realized, all of its aspects. To me, that helps. It may not help you at all, but it helps me to see something is a concept that's developing, and it comes to the very end time and reaches its fullness. You got it all. All the concept now is realized at the end time. It comes to its fruition. Walt Kaiser talks about that same thing. We've had some interesting talks. I think he shares the same perspectives in that sense of looking at it in that way. Okay. We come now to still, those are the ones that are, the true shepherd is the one that's going to rule over the people in the land that he will give to them. We come in 35, actually in 35:1 through 36:15. It all, I think, relates together. And this is what I would call the preparation of the land, actually preparation for the people to return. Okay? The land, what had happened to the land in the announcement of the judgment, and what happened in 586, from their perspective, the land was desolate. Jerusalem was destroyed. The land was left barren in that sense. Yes, there were some people still there. Jeremiah was there with Gedaliah up at Mizpah and so forth, at least for a while, until they shipped him out to Egypt. But the land is desolate. Okay, the land is defiled. The land needs to be prepared for the return of the people. Now, we immediately have here a prophecy directed specifically at Edom. And it has to do with Edom per se. But what I want you to notice in chapter 36, we read, he goes on talking about the removal and the concept of possession, because one of the things about Edom is they always want to possess the land. In fact, in the New Testament times, Edomia is actually the extension of Edom into the southern part of the West Bank. If I can use mixture of chronological times here. Into the southern part of the Canaanite area. Edom has always been wanting to possess. Edom is going to be here a representative of the nations, of the foreign nations who have possessed or tried to possess the land. And we, if I can just move over to 36 for a moment, in verse 4, therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord, because he's talking to the land. In this, he's speaking to the land. I'm going to get you ready. He says, to the mountains and to the hills, this is what the Lord says, to the mountains, to the hills, the ravines, the valleys, to the desolate ruins, the deserted towns that have been plundered and ridiculed by the rest of the nations around you. So we're talking about all the nations. This is what Adonai Yahweh says, in my burning zeal I have spoken against the rest of the nations, against all Edom. See it? Edom is a representative of all the nations. That doesn't mean that Edom doesn't have its own thing, because that's basically what's going to happen in chapter 35. You're going to have specifically against Edom, but in a sense they are a representation, a picture of really what's true of all those who have sought to possess the land. And here he explicitly makes that representative statement. All the nations, that is, all Edom. Okay, well, Edom is not literally all nations. They are representative of all nations within that context. So we'll come back to that. So this is why you have to see 35 and 36 up through 15 as kind of a package. It kind of goes together. We have the specific judgment in chapter 35 against Edom per se. Then we have the preparation of the land where we get rid of. He's going to remove all those that are like Edom. All the nations that have ever done that, he's going to move them out, and he's then going to prepare the land so that the people can come back to it in its goodness. Now you're an Israelite here, sitting, listening in the middle of the night, staying up late, not watching TV, but watching Ezekiel, which is better. Okay, better station. Okay, and you're listening to this. Wow, that's a great show on the shepherds, man. Oh, now we're going to talk about Edom. Oh, this is the latest show on Edom. Okay, we just flipped channels, and now we're on the Edom channel. So, chapter 35 is specifically the statement, and he's going to talk about the removal of Edom and the judgment he'll bring upon them. So he says, "Set your face against Mount Seir." Now, Mount Seir is terminology for Edom as well. They're the same thing. Okay? "And I will stretch out my hand against you and make you a desolate waste. I will turn your towns into ruins, and you'll be desolate." And of course, our purpose, which I hope hasn't become so familiar that it's kind of like, oh yes. No, everything God does is so that people will know that He is Yahweh. Yes.
That you will know, is he referring to the exiles in this, or referring to the people of Edom?
Yes. I think it's both, because the message is obviously to the exiles, but also it's directed. And I said, I can't tell you how it's going to work out that the message is going to get to Edom. But it is a message directed toward them, but it is initially heard and received by the exiles.
Is there any way from extra biblical material or anything that we see that people in Edom or these foreign lands said, we got it, we got the point. You know, we understand that Yahweh is God.
Not extra biblically that I'm aware of. Of course, the Scripture is going to imply that they will come to a place where they are restored. So there has to be, the implication would then be that there's some change that's going on there also. But it's only an implication. It's an indirect statement by the Scripture. It's just like we often, we read historically about some of the things that Egypt does and so forth, but we don't see that in Egyptian history. Which in some ways shouldn't surprise us, because, the leaders of these countries didn't like to talk about their failures often. Assyria never lost a battle. I don't know how they ended up being done away with. The Babylonians were a little bit more honest with us. They'll say, hey, we got it, man, we lost that one. At least they're... But by and large, people and the Egyptians appear to be those, because we have very little mention among the Egyptians of any defeat or any loss or anything that wasn't too good of PR for them at that point. So they're PR people, and the Syrians were the same way. We never do anything wrong, never any problems, and we don't need any help and so forth. Babylon was a little bit better. Every once in a while we do make a mistake, type of thing. Mm-hmm.
Did these messages even get to them, and how? And if
See,
they did, how did they get?
Yeah, I can't answer that. I don't know. This is all we have. But as I say, it is interesting. Obviously, it's the audience is the exiles. But it is a message to them. At least at the best, you have to wonder. If it's a message to them, do they get it? And I just don't have any data. So I can't answer that one. That's why I said, in answer to your question, I don't know how. And we talked about it even, I think, yesterday. I don't know how that would be done. But I think it certainly is highly likely that the message would have gotten there. Certainly it's recorded. Certainly they could have gotten it after the fact, if nothing else. Just like we do. We have the message as well. So he's going to, we come then to verse 5, and we find the reason, okay? Which again, I hope you're familiar, if you haven't already been familiar before even this course, the fact that the prophet's primary framework of communication is what we call a judgment speech, or often what we call a prophetic lawsuit. Prophetic, actually, they use the Hebrew term reeve, which means lawsuit. It's a legal lawsuit. They're going to bring a case, a lawsuit against Israel. The prophets as a prosecutor to them. But they use this, they use a prosecutor or a legal form, and they will give the accusation or the indictment about the people, and then they'll give the verdict. That's a constant, so you're constantly looking for your ya'ans and your lachins, okay? The becauses and the therefores. That will guide you as you look and see, okay, this is the basis for it, and here's what the judgment's going to be. So, in verse 5, because you harbored ancient hostility and delivered the Israelites over to the sword at the time of their calamity, the time their punishment reached its climax. So Edom was, as the people, and we have some extra biblical statement that does help us in this. The people would be trying to flee and leave the siege and so forth, and the Edomites would catch them and turn them over to the Babylonians. So there's this the ancient hostility, all the way from the time of Jacob and Esau. What did Esau say when they parted there after Jacob and his sneaky, conniving ways got the last will and testament? I'll kill you. That's why Jacob was scared spitless when he returned to the land. And boy, he had all those hundreds and thousands of gifts and stuff out there. We got to try to help this thing, and God in His grace did solve that problem. But there's been this hostility, and it becomes a picture, and that's why I think again Edom is the representative, because of the traditional hostility between Edom and Judah and Israel. That picture that's come all the way from Jacob and Esau. And therefore Edom becomes a very good country to be the representative of all those who are anti-Israel at that point. But their specific accusation, you've harbored the ancient hostility and delivered the Israelites over to the sword in the time of their calamity, the time their punishment reached its climax. Therefore, so now we have the verdict, because of that, I will give you over to bloodshed, and it will pursue you. Since you did not hate bloodshed, bloodshed shall pursue you. Or in other words, we have lex talionis going on here. You know what that is? It means punishment in kind, Yeah. And so you shed their blood, your blood's going to be shed at this point. I will make Mount Seir a desolate waste and cut off from it all who come and go. I will fill your mountains with the slain. Those killed by the sword will fall in your valleys, and your hills and your valleys and your ravines, and I will make you desolate forever. Forever. It's still desolate. Your towns will not be inhabited. Then you will know that I am Yahweh. Now, so to speak, let's try it again. Okay, verse 10. Because, now we're going to have again an indictment. Because you have said. Now, this is what they have said. These two nations and countries, that is Israel and Judah, will be ours. We will take possession of them. See, there's that There's that thing. These foreign countries want to take possession of the people of Israel. Okay? Even though I, Yahweh, was there. Therefore, what's the verdict? Since you have been wanting to possess them, as sure as I live, says Adonai Yahweh, I will treat you in accordance with the anger and jealousy you showed in your hatred of them. I will make myself known among them when I judge you. Again, we're going to have a lex talionis type situation. You're going to experience the same thing that you were wanting to happen to them. Then you will know that I Yahweh have heard all the contemptible things that you have said against the mountains of Israel. You said, quote, they have been laid waste and have been given over to us to devour. You boasted against me and spoke against me without restraint, and I heard it. This is what Adonai Yahweh says. While the whole earth rejoices, I will make you desolate. Wow. Because, here we come again to because. What's the reason? Because you rejoiced when the inheritance of the house of Israel became desolate. That is how I will treat you. You will be desolate. There's judgment in kind. It's taking place. O Mount Seir, I will make you desolate. O Mount Seir, you and all of Edom. Then they will know that I am Yahweh. And there he's giving us a little hint of what's coming in 36. So this is going to be true to all those who have sought to possess the land. All those who have wanted Israel and Judah to be desolate. All those who have harbored hostility against them. God's going to remove them and they will be desolate. But specifically Edom in this situation. So that then brings us to, we're continued. I mean, this it really you really should kind of do away with your chapter division here. And just to get the continued flow that goes on. So, Son of Man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel. Since that's true, now let's talk to the land. That may seem a little strange. But again, understand the importance of the land. And he's going to say we got to get the land ready. We've got to prepare the land for them. And that's what we're going to see in 36. O mountains, is what the Lord says in verse 2. The enemy said to you, aha, to the mountain. The ancient heights have become our possession. See, boy, there's that possession. It keeps coming. Everybody is wanting to possess the land, and people have done that. They've crisscrossed the land. They've come and taken it at different times. Each of these countries have tried to do that. Specifically Edom, and Edom is the representative, therefore, of the whole. But it's true of all the nations. They have said, the ancient heights have become our possession. Therefore prophesy and say, this is what Adonai Yahweh says. And now we have again, because. Now here's the indictment. Because they ravaged and hounded you from every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations, and the object of people's malicious talk and slander. There's the indictment. Now we're broadening it. It's not just Edom, it's all the nations, and then he's going to say Edom is representing all the nations, okay? What is true has been true of Edom from ancient hostility. This is true of all those who have, because they've ravaged you, they've hounded you on every side, so that you might become a possession of the nations and the object of their malicious talk, their slander, their mocking, their taunting. What's the consequence? What's the verdict? Therefore, verse 4. Therefore, what am I going to do? O mountain of Israel, hear the word of Adonai Yahweh. The Lord says to the mountain and hills, to the ravines and valleys, to the desolate ruins, to the deserted towns that have been plundered and ridiculed, and to the rest of the mountains, by the rest of the nations around you. This is what he's going to say. He's speaking to the land, because the land lies desolate. Okay? Everybody's wanted to, this is mine. You're mine. You're mine. No, it's mine. It's mine. Everybody wants this land. I hope geographically you understand where the land is. It's the land bridge between all the great nations. So yeah, it is kind of a nice place. Except as Gold in My Ear says, there's no oil there. And he says, this is what Adonai Yahweh says, in my burning zeal I have spoken against the rest of the nations and against all Edom. Those are oppositional to one another. For this glee and malice in their hearts, they have made my land their possession, so that they might plunder its pasture land. Therefore, prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains, the hills, the ravines, the valleys, this is what I say. I speak in my jealous wrath because you have suffered the scorn of the nations. The land has suffered the scorn of the nations. Okay? He's speaking to the land. Okay? Therefore, I swear with an uplifted hand, or is this an oath on the part of God, that the nations around you will also suffer scorn. Here we have our judgment in kind again. But you, O mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people, Israel. So here's how he's going to, in essence, there's going to be judgment upon those that want to possess. There we see elsewhere developed more clearly, they're going to be removed, taken out of the land, and I'm going to clean up, I'm going to clean house. Okay? Here's what I'm going to do. The land will produce, in verse 8, branches and fruit for my people, Israel, for they will soon come home. It's kind of nice, we use that phraseology today, welcome home. I must confess, and for you who are not U.S. citizens, but it probably, I trust, would be true with you in your home country. I can't explain to you the emotional feeling of when I go through passport control, and in this country normally, the people at passport control say to me as an American citizen, welcome home. There's just something about that, It's be appreciative of what you have, and it's a wonderful thing. And I trust that's true for the rest of you in your home countries. Something great about being home, And so he's going to say here to them, they'll soon come home. Boy, can you imagine what that meant to those exiles sitting there in the middle of the night? We're going to have a Messiah rule us. He's going to get rid of all these guys that have tried to possess our land over and over again from every side, just like Edom. And he's going to and he's going to make it fruitful again. And we're going to be home soon. Okay? I am concerned for you, and will look on you with favor, and you will be plowed and sown. He's speaking to the land. And I will multiply the number of people upon you, even the whole house of Israel. Now, obviously, that didn't happen at the end of the Babylonian captivity, and it hasn't happened today. But it will happen where you'll have the whole house of Israel all come home. We reach the fullness of these statements. At the end time, we have partial aspects, so to speak. The concept is being worked out. Yes, there was the return at the Babylonian captivity. There were a number that came back, but they had a choice, and a number didn't come back. You remember, if you go back and read those lists in Ezra and Nehemiah, they had some relatively small returns at that point. People kind of got assimilated into some of those countries. But he will ultimately, I will multiply so the land will hold the whole house of Israel. I better do a little expansion work here. But the towns will be inhabited. The towns will be inhabited, and the ruins rebuilt. I will increase the number of men and animals upon you, and they will be fruitful and become numerous. I will settle people on you, as in the past, and will make you prosper more than before. Then you will know that I'm Yahweh. I'm doing what I promised. I said I'd return you. I said that way back there in the Mosaic Covenant. I've said it all along. You will know that I'm who I say I am, and I do what I do. I will cause people, my people Israel, to walk upon you. Okay? They will possess you, and you will be their inheritance. That's the way it was planned. It's the inheritance of Israel. And will never again, you will never again deprive them of their children. Everybody's going to come home. I don't know about you. We delight to have people come home in our family. We see our family once a year, and we don't have a home. We're homeless people. We don't own one of those things. You know, we're not under the bridges yet, but we're homeless people. Okay. And but I can guarantee you, for my wife, and I'm sure for your wife, especially the wives, the nest is very important. And they just get thrilled out of their minds when all the chicks are home. Now, your chicks may not be old enough to have left the nest, but when they do, there's no greater thrill for you than they're home. That's basically what he's saying to the land. Your people are home. Okay? They've come home. Everybody's there. All of them. What a wonderful time. The land has been cleaned up. It's fruitful. Got rid of all the problems, the people that have tried to possess everything. And you're just home in peace and security. Home with your people. And you'll never again be deprived of your children that are supposed to be in your land. Verse 13, this is what Adonai Yahweh says, because, and we have here a reason, because people say to you, people are saying to the land, not Yahweh, but people are saying to the land. What are they saying? You devour men and deprive your nation of its children. Because it's the way it looked. You know, when all the possessions would come and they would be taken out of the land, you know, you devour your children. Boy, what kind of a land is this? You deprive them of their children. Well, he says, therefore, here's my verdict for that. You will no longer devour men or make your nation childless. No longer will I make you hear the taunts of the nations. No longer will you suffer the scorn of the peoples or cause your nation to fall, declares Adonai Yahweh. No longer. Won't happen. You, the land, will have the joy and the privilege of receiving your people home. The land will be prepared for them. I'm getting home ready. Getting the house ready. Again, if you've been in that place where your children come home, your wife is like a windmill in a gale storm, getting the nest ready, okay, for them to come home. And I remember our youngest son, when our two older ones, because there's a 12-year gap between he and the oldest, and an 8-year gap with the next. He was to tag along at the end. When they would come home, when we lived in Vienna, and they came home from either here or somewhere else, he thought it was royalty coming. I mean, it was just, he couldn't wait. You know? And there's just that thrill of coming home. Okay? Remember, where's your home? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember when we first went to the mission field, my wife will tell you that she woke up in the middle of the night as we were sleeping in a strange bed at that point in Vienna, Austria. And she said, I'm not here and I'm not there. Oh God, you are my dwelling place. Okay. And one day, though, we'll be home. Okay? I'm ready. He's getting it ready. He told us he's gone up there to get it all fixed up. Get the mansion fixed up for us. And we'll be coming home. See, these concepts are true throughout the Scripture, by the way. The Old Testament's not different from the New. He just carries on the concepts and develops them further for us in the New Testament so that we come to that fullness, that fruition, not only in Jesus, but in the whole of all that, because of him, of all the blessings that come. Now, beginning in chapter 36:16, we have a slight turn here in these messages to talk, okay, I've got everything ready, so let me tell you how I'm going to get them home.